Y Media Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.
Hello and welcome to the Editor's Take. It's always so great to spend this time because in studio, I have the group editor, Yudhvir Jaswal, and we're going to talk about the NATO summit that took place, as well as this Iran war that has erupted with the United States. And I want to ask him some questions about what he thinks and how the NATO summit went, and essentially what is President Trump up to? It seems like the war that erupted with Iran kind of hijacked the NATO summit. And so I wanted to get his thoughts on that. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much, Monaji. It's always good to be here. You know, there's lots happening, as you were mentioning, regarding the NATO summit. Not only the NATO summit just happened recently, but also, you're right. I mean, it's very much connected with the Iran war because right at the start, President Trump did announce the strikes that were exchanged with Iran. Yeah. So, yes.
Yes. So what I want to ask you about is essentially, I'm so sorry. Can I turn that down? Can I close the door? It's so sorry. Are we live? I don't even know if we're live.
I think so. We will.
It's okay. Anyways. Okay. Wait, let's continue. Sorry, So I didn't know. Okay, but yeah, I just when my own voice comes back to my ear, I can't think, and that's why I'm stuttering. Yeah.
Y Media is a media company.
Yeah. Okay.
With 360-degree approach in reaching the audience over 8 media platforms. Television, Channel Y Canada, 24/7, available nationwide. Toronto, Ottawa.
Welcome to Y Media. Today we're here in Ottawa.
Vancouver.
Welcome to Y Media. We are at the Port of Vancouver.
Calgary.
Y Media Group is here live at the G7 Summit in Alberta.
Rogers 857. Bell 828. Telus 2418. Ignite 707. Channel Y USA now available on Dish Network. Sling. Channel Y USA now available across USA. New York. Miami. Washington, D.C. Chicago.
We are here at the 2025 Chicago Auto Show.
San Francisco. Los Angeles. Y Plus 24/7, English language channel available across North America.
Hello and welcome to the Editor's Take. I'm Ramona Singh, and it's always so great to spend this time with you because we get a chance to talk to the group editor and we get a chance to ask him big questions about what's happening around the world as well as in Canada. Just recently, there was the NATO summit in Turkey with 32 NATO members who attended. And they made some really big pledges about what they're going to do when it comes to their defense spending, the new targets, as well as a new round of funding for Ukraine. So, of course, I want to ask the group editor what he thinks about what took place at the NATO summit. And at the same time, coinciding what was taking place in Turkey, well, the Iran-United States war erupted again. When I say war, well, we're in a ceasefire. If you recall, there was a MOU that was signed on June 17th with President Trump at the end of the G7 summit, as well as the Iranian president. And then you saw Pakistan also sign it. And the whole world thought, great, we're going to have our energy prices come back down, which affects inflation numbers. And the cost of living and affordability crisis is going to get under wraps. And then lo and behold, just not so long later, the war erupted. And it looks like from both sides, they say the ceasefire is over. So I want to ask, the group editor, Yudhvir Jaswal, who is in studio with us, about what he thinks on those massive topics and the implication has not only in the world economy, but as well as in Canada. Hello and welcome.
Thank you so much, Ramonaji. It's always so good to be with you here at the Editor's Take. And I know these are two very important topics. There's this sort of overlap as well. We just had the NATO Summit, and this is the biggest defense alliance. We have the G7. It's a group of the richest or the biggest, one of the biggest economies at that time. And then you have the G20 alliance. There's so many other, there's BRICS, with Brazil, China, Russia, India, South Africa, and then there are other members too. The Asian Summit. There are so many summits. But I think as far as the Defense Alliance is concerned, this is the biggest alliance, the NATO alliance, though there are challenges, which we'll talk later. And as you rightly mentioned, it was a bit overshadowed by the war between U.S. and Iran, right? Even before the war started, we heard the breaking news. There were U.S. strike on Iran. Yeah, and that definitely begs the bigger question that is ceasefire still in place, yes or no? And there's a lot of ambiguity on that, but we'll talk later. Please.
Yes. Okay. So the top of line is that prior to the NATO summit, you had Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, say that he wants to move the number from 2% of GDP, which it feels like Canada just met it a few months ago, to 5%. By 2035. Now, this number was floated around by President Trump when he first got elected for his second term. And he was like, what, 2%? We should really be at 5%. And now it looks like NATO has asked that. And essentially prior to the summit, the question and the ask was for these 32 member countries to have a proof of how they're going to spend it, what are the timelines, and that it's going to be pegged at annually how to reach that target and not just verbally agree to it. So there's that aspect, which I want to know about what you think in terms of like, what is all the military aspect, like rearming as well? Like for Europe, it looks like this is the massive rearming efforts since the Cold War. Russia still, they said, is a threat to Europe and the NATO alliance. Now, the question being, if Russia's been in a war with Ukraine for about 4 years, and then onto that, $70 billion funding was also guaranteed for 2026 for Ukraine, and also for 2027, they said that they're going to hit the same mark at $70 billion. That's a significant amount of money. The question begs is, when will this war be over? And is Russia still the biggest threat, given that it's been a war in 4 years and it's not been able to win it, obviously, because Ukraine's had so much aid as well? But then after, let's just say if this war concludes, is Russia in any position to be going to a war with any other country? And then second to that is, when you rearm to these levels that we're talking about, that's not just going to sit in your inventory. Are we planning for like World War III in the future and to use the weaponization of what's taking place right now? And how would the public feel on elections when they believe that their government is going to spend 5% of GDP on just arming to go to war to kill people in different countries and not investing it back into, in this case, Canadian society?
Yeah, great questions, by the way. And, that's a lot of money. And when you say I want Editor's Take, it's a two-part thing, if you allow me. First things first, personally, and even as an editor, my Editor's Take on this whole thing that we're discussing, the NATO 2%, 5%, I've been always questioning this. Though I've always hated Canada to become a global power, and in that I do include, if you want to become a global power, the world is becoming more and more hostile place to live. So I do understand that. I don't want to be too idealistic that, nothing is going to go wrong and we are not going to be attacked by any other country. What we've witnessed in the few years right now, I mean, it's not just Russia attacked Ukraine, but Russia targeted Georgia as well, then Crimea as well. We've seen U.S. going out on wars against different countries, whether it was Iraq, the reasons we all know were not right, and then against Afghanistan, recently against Iran, Israel really attacking many of its neighbors for right or wrong reasons. We can discuss that. But yes, I do get it. The world is a very hostile place. We're talking about Arctic sovereignty over here and so many other things. Russia is a threat or not. We can discuss that. But very importantly, 5% of our GDP, uh, we build statues. Recently I was in central London and I did see statues of Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela. What are those for? And that took me into an era when I was there in central London. This is what really intrigued me, and the kind of architecture, the heritage, the history, all that. And I was thinking, that was the era, and why NATO was built, the biggest defense alliance. I mean, and you rightly said so. I mean, when a common person is going to vote on a ballot paper, and on one side, if at all they look at the manifestos and the discussions, a common man is led to believe that, we are voting for someone who's going to stop the wars. Vote for someone, this money can go into healthcare, this money can go into universities, research, innovation. And one thing which really excites me, but with due respect, I'm saying I don't see a lot of excitement in many people for that. This thing really excites me. This money can be poured into building huge stadiums. I love watching matches, the Copa America that I saw in US. If I talk only about US, the Copa America Cup, amazing. FIFA Soccer World Cup, the Cricket World Cup. Look at the infrastructure Australia has built, the sports infrastructure. Why this money can't be poured into healthcare, universities, so many other things, into the energy sector, innovation, and into building beautiful stadiums across Canada, across Europe. I would love to see all that money going into all these areas. But now, so I'm not really impressed with all this, what's happening. But as an editor's take, since the second part of your question is, where do we stand? What are we doing? And what's happening? The ground reality. Let's talk about that. You're right. I mean, the target earlier was said that 2% of the GDP. Then it went on to 5%. Now that's what we're talking here. Currently, Canada just touched its 2% of our GDP numbers on defense spending. So on defense spending, if I look at all the 32 nations bloc right now, I think the average would be the Europe and the Canadian average included. I don't think so. It'll be more, even 2.5%, or for that matter, even 3%. US would be the only country right now, as we speak, which could be spending 3.5% of its GDP on the defense budget. Imagine we start hitting $1 trillion. It's almost $1 trillion looking at the economy of US. So imagine we're spending almost $1 trillion. And mind you, this is on an annualized basis. $1 trillion on an annual basis, we're spending on defense, all this $1 trillion. Even if you cut that to half, actually, it should be the other way around. And why I'm saying, I'm not being, sometimes even on my radio or TV shows, sometimes people tell me, you talk about two things which are very ideal or something which is written in the book, but no, practically, I'm being very pragmatic here. I'm being very practical here. The only one country in the world which was attacked by nuclear weapons, that's Iran. That's Japan. Japan never built nuclear weapons, never. And today also, how many countries have nuclear weapons? And has that really deterred the wars? Ukraine and Russia are fighting the war. India and Pakistan have both nuclear weapons. They went into war or a conflict in 1999, the Kargil war that we all witnessed for a few days. They're both up against each other. Recently, we saw another conflict between India and Pakistan. Both the countries are having nuclear. So if the nuclear weapon cannot guarantee you, if that is not a deterrent against war, then what exactly are we talking? 2%, 3%, 5%. So as much as I'm saying, yes, take a pragmatic approach, or for practical purposes, the world is hostile, 1.5, 2%, fine. Which I won't agree, but looking at the current situation, it's fine. But then at the end of the day, 3%, 4%, 5%, like Canada has already announced, we're going to make the biggest purchase of submarines. It could go up to 80, 90, $100 billion. They're not coming out with numbers because they say, the negotiations prejudiced because of that. Okay, fine. But what I'm saying over here is, what else are we electing the leadership for? We have currently two wars which are quite active. One is Russia and Ukraine war. We were led to believe that, you know what, the Russia and Ukraine war would be over, or it will be settled. That hasn't stopped as we speak. Billions of dollars are being poured in. Where are those billions of dollars going to the Ukraine war? If at all that was being spent for any humanitarian causes or rebuilding efforts in Ukraine, I would understand that. Yes, please do so. There are, you know, people there are Ukrainian citizens, they are fellow human beings for cause of humanity. If this billions of dollars was spent into any IT or any infrastructure, I would agree. But here we are, and NATO, what we're talking about, this alliance, you know, your question is very apt, Rohanaji. Thank you for that question. What did NATO really achieve? You know what? The least NATO could have achieved was, okay, set a target, a date, when are we going to meet again? Even that was not set. I agree that just like we have G7, it's a summit which happens on an annual basis every year. G20 happens on an annual basis, but NATO doesn't happen on an annual basis. But in Albania next year and this year before the summit, every single leader, if I could read between the lines, they were all terrified. There was, if not terrified, if not fearful, at least there was some sort of reluctance that, okay, fine, are we attending? Even President Trump, he didn't mince his words. He clearly said, if not for the friendship of, I'm not quoting exact words, I'm just saying what he meant. If not for the friendship of Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, I wouldn't have been here. Towards the end, they all did put a unified face for the family photos, and then they gave some statements that everything is fine, hunky-dory. But, you know, at the start of this NATO, he was blasting everyone, all his NATO allies, that you didn't join the war. And then Keir Starmer clearly said that we're not going to get pulled in this war. Our Prime Minister Mark Carney, you know, as I was talking earlier as well, he's the one who's become the poster boy of the rupture between the Western allies and the US. So there's no way he's going to join the war. You talk to Germany, you talk to all those countries. Spain, President Trump was saying, oh, we are even going to stop trade with Spain. So what exactly is this NATO alliance achieving? I think we have to start talking to Russia. We have to get Russia on the table and somehow stop this war. I don't think so this is benefiting anyone.
You think that that's what NATO's aim should be, to see how to end this war, not to just rearm and increase the amounts that countries would have to now, you know, invest in the defense sector. It's very scary. And what happens if the citizens decide they're going to not join the army or the Navy? What are you going to do? Are you going to do a draft? Like there's that whole talk about the United States having a draft soon. That's very scary times to be able, because what we're talking about is not only killing people from other nations, but sending your own sons and daughters to war to kill them for what means. Like you listed, what was interesting is what you just listed is that there's only a handful of countries that cause the problems. All the other countries are not causing the problems. Is that not the case? They're not actually actively, it's just a handful that you just mentioned. It's the United States, it's Israel, it's Russia. There's a handful, and then there's obviously what's taken place in the Middle East, but the question begs of like what's really happened or certain key corridors.
Yeah, I would agree to that. You're right.
So maybe the world is not such a hostile place. Maybe it's just those countries are very hostile and they like to create an environment where the global economy gets impacted.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, give or take, I would, out of the 200 countries, I would say, with due respect, I'm saying, and I'm not saying whether they are right or wrong. In total, you could say you're right. There are about 10 countries, give or take, and how do we manage them? And that's what leadership is all about. So I can go on all those countries that you just mentioned, like, when was the last time we heard Japan went into war? South Korea, Australia, and that's why their economies are doing so well. I mean, look at Norway, Finland, Sweden, Netherlands. They're all focusing, on the social assistance of. I mean, of course, the taxes are high, but look at the programs that they're offering in terms of healthcare, education. And that's what we should be focusing on. I've spoken to many education ministers here in Canada that, why don't we have free education for university? I mean, imagine if, I cannot afford, my parents, imagine if they're not able to afford, and I still want to continue with my university, and your parents are rich enough, they could afford. That itself is not, with due respect, I'm saying that in itself could be not a level playing field. Of course, there are OSAP and all those things available, but why would you burden a student with a loan? I mean, study as much as you want. At least, that there shouldn't be any barrier just because of the financing options. And that's what's it's practically happening in parts of Europe. So that's what we should be focusing on. When was the last time you heard Australia, New Zealand, they went into war? No. And there are other 100 countries. I'm saying they're mostly tourist destinations, from Maldives to Mauritius to so many other countries. They don't enter into any sort of war. Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. Look at this thriving country, Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when the general media talks about the world being a more hostile place, yes, we're seeing a genocide take place in Palestine, but yet nothing's happened to holding the politicians in Israel, like the prime minister, accountable. And yet then the message comes out that, then we all have to remilitarize because, of what certain countries are doing actively. And then that means sending our young people to war and then keeping them in these conflicts. And that's the massive thing. There's a massive uprising in the United States with people saying that, because what happened was actually they passed legislation to merge the IDF as well as the U.S. Army. And at very high levels, and this has been a bit of a backlash. And then they also have news on there's going to be a draft in terms of then you have to go to the war, like before. In the United States, and there's a lot of backlash with what's taking place under President Trump's second term, because the whole point is that people do not want to go to war. People don't want to see genocides take place. People don't want to see children and families being torn apart and seeing the images that you see coming out of these conflicts is horrendous. But then when you look at, this is not the rest of the world. And that should not be the purpose of what these leaders are supposed to meet up for, to discuss, not just to say, okay, we're going to take your tax dollars. Because here's the reality. What's happening is, we have this onset of AI that's taking place, right? And already I can list tens of thousands, if not almost hundreds of thousands of jobs gone, right? We're talking, and I'm just talking about from big tech companies, right? From Meta 8,000, Microsoft's doing another few thousand, they're just gone. Where even Tata Consulting Services they're doing massive firing. Like, this is a reality that AI's come and it's faster, it's more efficient than a human being when it comes to certain tasks, whether it's copy, whether it's coding, whether it's analysis. And that's just the, tip of the iceberg. And you'll just need less people that can manage these tools. And then there's this entire AI race that's taking place where you have companies saying, well, we need these dollars to reinvest into this AI technology and race. So you have that taking place. So people are losing their jobs. So whatever few people there are who are going to work, then their tax dollars are going to go purchase arms and bombs and whatever else. And now the NATO has now talked not just about tanks and fighter jets. We're talking about AI surveillance. We're talking about cyber. We're talking about technology in defense. And so we're going to have robots, target and kill civilians, funded by the few people who are still working that haven't lost their jobs because of AI, and having that money go to defense. Like, do you see what? And then we're going to have data centers pop up to be able to fuel AI, which also, is a massive strain on the electricity, an energy of a city that it goes in or an area that it goes in. And then there's all the aspects of what are the health concerns, the amount of using the water to cool things down. Like, there's and critical minerals that are needed. That's why, chips, and memory chips are become so expensive, and that's why the cost of your phone and your laptops and basic things are going up. So when you see all of this, people losing jobs, the few people that are working, their money is going to go buy bombs to fuel this like surge in AI in defense, and then we're going to have more killing, and then we're going to send our sons and daughters to go get killed. There's just madness when you look at the cycle of this vicious cycle, and then the average person isn't having a better, easier, more comfortable life when it comes to the economics of things. Maybe spiritually, maybe emotionally great, but everything is interconnected. So did you see like this vicious cycle that they're all trying to sell us, that because of a few bad actors in terms of politicians who are taking their countries into wars and causing such conflicts that we all have to remilitarize?
Yeah, I will not definitely buy into that idea that we need to increase our spending on defense. When I say hostile, of course, there are a few hostile actors, but as I was mentioning earlier, and to your point, most of the world still, not most of the world, actually, everyone wants peace, not just most, everyone wants peace. It's just that, yes, sometimes there's, and when there are 200 countries on this planet, of course, we're bound to have some sort of conflicts. But that is what leadership is all about. How do you resolve all those conflicts? How do we work for those common denominators, whether it's good housing, food on the table, education, jobs, healthcare, infrastructure. I'll always plug in my sports thing, some stadiums. I definitely love to watch. There was a time when in political circles, when I would meet someone, even today as well, they say, "Hi, Mr. Infrastructure, how are you?" So they said, "You always talk about that is what we should be building on, infrastructure." Because infrastructure for me is a broader term, whether we're building the transit network or the health network or education infrastructure in all aspects. That's why I love the word infrastructure. That's my favorite word when I'm talking about leadership. Build infrastructure in space. So when we are talking about infrastructure, there's, with due respect, I'm saying there's no room for all these weapons war. And you said a very important aspect, that who is going to bring us out of this vicious cycle of war? And to this point, if I may ask, the U.S. Iran war, and on Editor's Take, I'll share my view one. And as an associate editor at Y Media, you cover the news, you follow that too, and I'll want your opinion too. For me, this U.S. and Iran deal, as I told you, I have used the two words, fragile peace. Why use the word fragile peace or fragile deal, whatever you want to use? The reason is that I clearly saw conflicting stories from both sides. And here we are, President Trump at NATO, using the word, which I'm very respectfully, this is what he used, and he used the word scum, and he also said, "You know what a scum means? I mean, it means sick. There's the leaders there in Iran are sick, So your question that Ramona, you're asking today, has the U.S.-Iran ceasefire collapsed for good? I don't think so. It has collapsed for good, but I think President Trump did say it's over. I know there will be challenges now, and they say they're exchanging the strikes. President Trump, he's ordered strikes across different parts of Iran, and then Iran is attacking the U.S. bases, whether it's Qatar, Bahrain, or in Kuwait, all the U.S. bases in the Middle East. So once again, what we are witnessing, yes, there are, NATO, with due respect, I'm saying, nothing changed much at NATO with regards to the US and Iran ceasefire. And Israel says its objectives are not met. So whatever those objectives are, and I clearly see, for right or wrong reasons, Israel will keep on changing the goalpost. So Israel will also say, "Oh, our objectives are not met." And then you have, there are other variables. Lebanon is there. You could say, "Oh, Lebanon, the ceasefire is part of the ceasefire." But Hezbollah fires a rocket, or Hezbollah does something, or Israel fires something, then Hezbollah, then there's Hamas, then there's Houthis, then there's Iran. There are too many variables in all this. Strait of Hormuz being a very important and integral part of all these discussions. But Strait of Hormuz is the new bargaining chip now, and Iran has suddenly realized that how important this bargaining chip is. So I think there, and I want to listen it from you, and then I think we don't have much time, so I'll leave it up to you. But I think there will be challenges. So off and on, there will be some sort of spike in the violence. We'll witness that. But then eventually, I hope that we see some sort of deal which is actually implemented on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, what took place is essentially there is the MOU that was signed on June 17th, 2 days ahead of schedule, where President Trump signed it right after the G7 summit in France. Now, it was ambiguous, the terms in the MOU. Now, mind you, it wasn't the final agreement. It created the basis for 60 days for this peace agreement to be negotiated. But essentially in there, it does say that, you know, the passage, Strait of Hormuz, will be cleared for vessels to continue to go. Now, what was the issue is that Iran doesn't want to lose its leverage on being able to control it, because it's been the key aspect of why it's been able to get through this war and get the United States to the table to agree on some of those terms, like, you know, to decide to give $12 billion of frozen Iranian assets back, remove the sanctions on Iranian oil, and remove the blockade. There's so many aspects of that, and what took place is Iran, as well as said, okay, we'll agree to any vessels that go by should notify us and any GCC country so we know it's going through, to be able to eventually formalize their control over it, right? To be able to charge a toll that they did at some points of when the war had escalated. And what happened was, before they put the talks aside to have the funeral procession for the late Ayatollah Khamenei throughout Iraq and Iran, they didn't come to terms of which other GCC countries will be part of the vessels, giving them a heads up, we're going to pass through. And what's happened in the Strait of Hormuz is there's the northern exit and there's the southern one. The southern one closer to Oman. The vessels were passing through there, which is why it erupted last week as well. And Iran said, no, it should go through the northern part, because Iran is foreseeing this, because you had Vice President J.D. Vance do interviews and said, okay, well, the president decided that we're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz, get countries to get their fuel supply, because they've been using their emergency as fuel, and now it's at an all-time low shortage, which is detrimental to a society, but also you have inflation and gas prices going through the roof. So he said, we're going to open it up so everybody refuels, and then we're going to see where the hand is at. So already Iran was expecting that this war would erupt, if not later this year, by next year, early March. And that everybody's right now refueling, repositioning, and that's what's taking place. And that this is also the president saying, okay, even though the markets react 5% when there is anything that goes on to the war and it affects crude, and then you see your gas prices go up. But what happens is crude oil prices come down when you see ceasefire and peace talks, but then it takes time for the price at the gas pump to come down, because that was purchase of, you know, the gas from previous weeks, and therefore it takes time. So even though it goes up fast at the gas pumps, it takes longer time to come down. And then, as we know, that affects your prices at the grocery store. And when you combine the high fuel charges as well as the price of goods, that and groceries, really, that's going to be about 40% of what's contributing to a higher inflation numbers. That's why we're seeing inflation grow month to month over our 2% target. So President Trump is like, okay, we'll open up the Strait of Hormuz, we'll sign this MOU that's ambiguous on so many other things, and then everybody gets their oil, we'll bring down the inflation, and he's got midterm elections in November. So he needs that time frame. So essentially we're in a situation where They didn't come to terms on some of these things, and Iran is already knows that, hey, we're going to go into war again because chances of trust, there's a massive trust deficit. We saw this in the war in 2025 for 12 days. They were in negotiations this year and a war erupted. So that's where things are at. And so what happened was then the United States hit about 90 targets throughout Iran. Then Iran started hitting Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, the U.S. military bases. And so now it's just an escalation. Meanwhile, the funeral processions are still continuing, where they're having, and you're seeing like millions of people come out. So that's a whole nother aspect of when they say, the entire thing about protests, that's all gone. You're seeing millions of people, and this is in the middle of the heat. So imagine this is July, and if you've been to the Middle East ever, it's hot. And especially Tehran, because you see the Freedom Tower in the middle. There's mountains around Tehran, so that is like a boiling point. So you can imagine it's probably 40 degrees temperature. It's very high, and all those millions of people, you can see sea to sea, like eye to eye from every corner, they're supporting and being there, chanting. So it's very significant.
Yeah, if we can stick to those pictures on full screen, and Ramonaji, if I may ask you, we're not seeing Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It's stated that he was injured during the U.S. Israel strikes. When his father got killed, but we haven't seen him even once. And we were. There were some sort of expectations that we might see him here. So we have not seen him here. What do you say? What do you have to say on this?
Well, the other three sons of the late Ayatollah Khamenei did attend, but
Yes.
Now Mujtaba Khamenei is the supreme leader.
Yeah.
And we know that no one's seen him. We know that he was badly injured, like you said, at the attacks where his mom, dad, his wife, kids, everyone got killed, and he got badly damaged from that attack. So we don't know what his condition is, but we even heard from the president that he's doing well. President of the United States, actually. So, but there, you could imagine the security concerns, because you had even President Trump say openly, like, look, everyone's there. We could just take them all out. He did say that. He did in the media flirt with the idea of, this was supposed to be a ceasefire because of the processions. And he said, they're all there. We can just take them out. And here you have it in a place where I could imagine why they want to keep the supreme leader safe. Now, what's interesting is when Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was alive, he did not agree to his son becoming the next supreme leader, because he had said this is not a monarchy where you have like your firstborn becomes, where this is it's a cleric state. So they would go and they would, pick the next supreme leader. And because of what erupted, now you have Mujtaba Khamenei, who's
do
now.
Do you think there is some sort of establishment behind all this, and that establishment definitely wants to, project Mujtaba Khamenei? Okay, fine, this is their supreme leader. He may or may not be that well really to go on, but in his absence, this establishment has taken over the reins, and they're in the control of things.
Well, what you don't know is what you don't know. And I think that's a big part of it. He's put some announcements and some statements out to the local news where that's been, published in international media. But, and even President Trump said, yeah, he's doing well. He's this and that. So we don't know actually, but this is why a lot of people will say, it looks like Iran won this war, is because, shy of not having military, navy, and not having a supreme leader that is present, it's still, everything is continuing. And even though they had asked for definitely a ceasefire, there would be no attacks, especially during the procession, they just decided, we need to cover the Strait of Hormuz, because they know it's a matter of time. If they allowed, here's the thing, and I'm not saying I agree with any of this, but I'm just trying to get you into the mind of what's going on. The more we understand any conflict, the better we're in a position to talk about it intelligently and in an articulate manner. And what you're seeing there is in the Strait of Hormuz, it's a very narrow choke point, and it's been divided into two parts. The top part is governed by Iran, and the bottom part is that it's really being monitored by the U.S. Navy, but it's closer to the Oman shore. So Iran is looking at it saying, if the vessels are now going next through through Oman, closer to the Oman shore, then tomorrow we can't close it, because then they're going to have a hold of it, and then they don't have nuclear. They don't have the Strait of Hormuz. There you go. So right there, yeah, please go back. That's great. There, so you see the southern part is Oman, the top part is Iran, and in that little curvature, if the vessels go closer to where Oman is, where you see UAE and Oman, and then not go near where Iran wants to formalize its control, then they know it's a matter of time. They're going to go back into war with Israel and the United States, and then now they lose the Strait of Hormuz. And this is why everything has also erupted. And they're saying, regardless, we don't care. You're going to put the blockades. You're going to put sanctions on our oil. We sell it anyway. Okay, now we'll go back to sell it at below market rate. But we know that if we can close this choke point off, look, this conflict was 4 months, and the United States came and signed an MOU. You have the Russia and Ukraine conflict go on for 4 years, but because it doesn't affect global markets, it doesn't affect inflation, it doesn't affect your gas prices and your grocery prices and unaffordability, then it can go on for years, and then we just keep giving it, putting money into it. Whereas you have a few weeks of that being closed up, the world says, hey, finish this.
So I think we could conclude that as President Trump was saying, the peace deal is over. That's exactly the words that he used. So I don't think so it's going to be over. The ceasefire won't collapse. No. We will have to get into some sort of negotiations. I wish we had more time, but we will carry on our discussion on Editor's Take. So stay tuned with us for all the geopolitical affairs. Stay tuned with us all the politics. And there's lots to discuss more. Ramonaji, it's always so good to be with you at the Editor's Take. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you for joining us and answering us all these great questions that we have. Thank you. Until next time, take care and be well.
Stay tuned with Y Media. Thank you.